So we are continuing our lecture on the reality of Al-Ain. And to summarize, for those that didn't attend last week, I had gone over three topics. Number one was the history of the concept of Al-Ain in pre-Islam. And I mentioned this is a almost universal concept that is found in what other cultures, guys? Quick quiz. Yeah, and I want some names. Sumerians, very good. What else? Romans, what else? Ancient Egyptians. Should you give one more? The Greeks as well. Okay, so all of this and more. The Akkadians as well and others. Ancient Babylon. So we find that the notion of the evil eye is universal pre-Islam. Then we mentioned the second part, which is the Qur'anic evidences. And what did we conclude about the Qur'anic evidences? Implicit, not explicit. Every verse that is in the Qur'an, you can interpret it as evil eye and you can interpret it as something else. An angry eye, like looking at you in anger. Or jealousy, which is something different than the evil eyes we're going to come to. Then we mentioned 7 or 8 ahadith, which are crystal clear. Al-Ainu Haqq is the most obvious one. And in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, multiple incidents where the Prophet ﷺ is saying, evil eye has afflicted, do ruqya, protect your children from the evil eye. So we have multiple ahadith in this regard. Jayyid. That was last week. Now let us now move on to the next section. What has been the interpretation of Muslim scholars? Let's begin with Ahl Sunnah, Sunni scholars. Obviously, Ahl Sunnah, because they prioritize a hadith, the vast majority of them, this is the default, they have affirmed the reality of the evil eye. And there are so many quotations, we can go on and on. An-Nawawi says that in these ahadith, there is the affirmation of the Amr al-Ain, the reality of Al-Ain. وَأَنَّهَا قَوِيَّةُ الضَّرَرِ. And that it is powerful in its harm. Its harm is very powerful. So An-Nawawi is a mainstream scholar, he's saying this. And you have Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in his commentary, also similar. And Ibn al-Qayyim has an entire section in his book Ad-Da' wa Dawa. He has an entire section about the dangers of Al-Ain and the reality of Al-Ain. And he says that Al-Ain is like an arrow that comes from the soul of the one who has jealousy. And it targets the one that is the object of jealousy. And sometimes that arrow of the Ain afflicts the target, and sometimes it misses that target. So if it hits the target and there's no protection, then the arrow enters and causes harm. And if there is protection, then it is possible that the arrow is deflected or the arrow is going to have minimal impact. So he's giving a metaphor like the bow and arrow. And he says that Al-Ain is like an arrow from the soul. And it will be launched from the one who has hasad to the object of the hasad. And it is possible that it misses. So he has it and nothing happens. And it's possible it hits. And if it hits, the man can have piety. So by protection, he means dhikr of Allah and piety. And it can completely deflect or it can be minimized. So this is something that hardly any mainstream scholar, basically within Sunnism, by and large, you have the default understanding that Ain is a reality. Now, are there any other opinions within Sunnism? I tried to find alternatives, and the only alternatives that I found within Sunnism are people that either interpreted Al-Ain to be nothing but jealousy, or they said that they attempted to minimize the reality of Al-Ain without denying it. I did not find any mainstream Sunni scholar that completely negated Al-Ain. But you have voices that are diminishing its impact. Either saying, for example, that Al-Ainu Haqq, yes, meaning jealousy can harm. Not that there's another concept that is going to supernaturally impact you. Al-Ainu Haqq, beware of Al-Ain, mean beware of the jealous eye. Because when you're jealous, you do things. Or there are people that basically diminish it to almost being non-effective. And names in this category include the famous Rashid Rida. In our times, Dr. Tariq al-Suwaidan, if you listen, he has many lectures on Al-Ain. And you can listen to what he has to say. I don't want to misquote him, but it's clear that he's not following the dominant view. He has a minority view. Also, Sheikh Akram Nadawi in England as well, a great scholar of our times, and others of that nature, that they're not negating the hadith. They are Sunnis. They affirm the hadith, but they interpret it in a way as to basically make it not something you guys should be worried about, diminishing the impact of this concept and claiming that the bulk of the reality of how people perceive it is superstition. That's not what the hadith came to affirm. In other words, what this group is predominantly saying is that mainstream people have exaggerated this concept. Not that it doesn't exist, but even if it exists, it's something very rare, or it's something obscure, or it's something that even if it's there, we don't change our lives because of it. And all of them, this category, are critical of how easily people blame their problems on al-ayn. And because of that, they themselves don't do anything to fix their problems because they say this is because of al-ayn. So they're frustrated, this group, they're frustrated at what they believe to be a quick psychological fix that is actually damaging. Okay, so this is a group of scholars that they accept the hadith. They're not saying the hadith is not authentic because it's Bukhari and Muslim. I mean, if you're Sunni, then basically you have a big issue if you say it's not authentic. But they are interpreting it in ways that would diminish its impact in the modern world. So this is within mainstream Sunnism. Of course, as for outside of Sunnism, I found it very interesting. You actually have different views. So some non-Sunnis, especially some of the Mu'tazila, and of course the Mu'tazila are a group that they have a higher bar of accepting hadith. They don't accept a hadith except with a number of criterion, mutawatir, something of this nature. So a number of the Mu'tazila, Al-Jubba'i, Al-Sharif, Abu Hashim, Abu Al-Qasim Al-Balkhi, these are icons of the Mu'tazili creed. They basically said there's no such thing as al-ayn because we don't think these ahadith are authentic. We don't believe the Prophet said this. So they rejected that notion of al-ayn. And of course, in our times as well, you have that type of thought. And again, guys, I'm being factual here. I want to educate you. When I quote names, it's not an endorsement, obviously, right? The point of education, you should be aware. And I have a different philosophy. I don't want to censor other ideas from you. You just do a simple Google or YouTube, all the ideas are going to come up. I don't believe in censorship. In our time and age, it doesn't make any sense. So when I quote you, it's not an endorsement. You should be aware. And we should be brave enough to discuss who says what's wrong with that. And okay, let's see what other scholars said, what other intellectuals said. We can disagree. And then we also have to discuss what is the verdict of disagreeing. We'll get there. So another famous thinker of our times, many of the Arabs know him, Dr. Adnan Ibrahim. He has many lectures on al-ayn, and in all of them, he is absolutely dismissive. He says these are not authentic ahadith. I don't think the Prophet said them. So he rejects that the Prophet ever said something of this nature, and obviously because of this, when you don't believe the Prophet said it, then you will reject their existence. So he says that they do not, there's no such reality at all. This is simply a popular superstition. And he says Islam has come to abolish superstition. It's not come to affirm it. So you have this group over there. And this group is different than the previous category because the previous category affirmed the authenticity of the ahadith. But then they interpret it in a way that is slightly different. Whereas this category does not even accept hadith. They don't. So the conclusion might be similar, but the way they got there is very different. And this is very important because when you judge somebody, you judge the methodology and not just the final verdict. In Islam, you judge how they got to their position and not just the final position. And then I found this very interesting. There are groups of people who are not fans of Sunni hadith, yet still they affirmed al-ayn. I found this very interesting. There are groups of people they're not Sunni and they don't accept hadith, but they did affirm the ayn. Why? Because they believed al-ayn is something that is a spiritual impact between the souls that has nothing to do with theology and religion. It is, so this group of people, basically they're saying, just like we have the physical world, we also have a spiritual world. And in the spiritual world, there are mechanisms of impacting the souls that are causal and direct in nature. It has nothing to do with superstition. It's the soul impacting the soul in the world of the souls. So it's nothing to do with religion, it's simply a physical, well, not quite physical, but you get my point. It's causal is the better word, right? In other words, it's not superstitious from them. From this perspective, it is the alamul arwah, the world of the souls interacting amongst itself. And in this category are a number of prominent thinkers. Number one amongst them is Ibn Sina, Avicenna. Ibn Sina was no Sunni at all. Ibn Sina was a through and through philosopher. Ibn Sina was a philosoph. And he doesn't really care about what hadith says. Yet in his book, Danishnameh, he has an entire section on Al-Ain, and also in his Kitab al-Shifa, he mentions that the Ain is the power that one soul has, one evil soul, a nafs al-khabith, has over another soul. So he's not looking at it from a spiritual perspective per se, a dini perspective, a religious perspective. He believes a corrupt, a bad soul has the power to harm a good soul. And that is in the world, just like a thug has the power to beat you up physically, right? So he believes a bad soul is like a thug. And in the world of the souls, it has the power to impact you via this notion called Al-Ain. Is that clear, right? So he's not really bringing Islam, no. It's his worldview of cosmology and of the souls. And there are other people like this as well. By the way, interestingly enough, again, for the Pakistanis in the audience, I mentioned Adnan Ibrahim. In the Pakistani world, we have other thinkers like Ghamidi Saab. And again, I'm respectful here. I'm mentioning their names with respect. I have no agenda here. You should be aware. It is what it is. And Ustad Ghamidi, Dr. Ghamidi, he also has a similar view, believe it or not, in which he believes that the Ain is not a religious concept, but it is true from the spiritual concept. Just like Ibn Sina, exact same thing. It is true from the world of the souls. And his view is that the religion didn't come to talk to us about this, but it still is true because the world of the souls impacts each other, and the notion of how it impacts, the popular culture has called it Al-Ain, and he says that the religion is not coming to affirm or deny, it's simply telling you that it is also there. So, bottom line, that the mainstream view has been to affirm the reality of Al-Ain, and that the soul can harm another soul because of the jealousy in that soul. However, as I said, some thinkers within Sunnism, they had a slightly different view. And in my analysis, Wallahu ta'ala alam, those thinkers within Sunnism, and of course you must know this, I have, these are all my friends and colleagues, Dr. Tariq Suwaidan, Sheikh Akram Nadwi. I was just with the both of them recently, last month, both of them, and I respect and admire them. They are friends and colleagues. I shouldn't even say colleagues, they are mentors of mine. I look up to them. Yet I politely, respectfully, don't agree with their analysis. With respect, utmost respect, and I want also for us to be getting to this level, that it's okay to have different opinions. One of our problems that we have is the narrow-minded sectarianism that exists. To the best of my knowledge, no theologian in our tradition has ever said, believing in Al-Ain is a part of our theology. If you don't believe in it, you become a kafir. I don't know any theologian that said this. And if you know, please educate me. So, I believe in Al-Ain. But if you find a great alim within Sunnism, a great mujtahid within Sunnism, who affirms the hadith, but then he goes, for example, one of these, I forgot, I think Sheikh Tariq Suwaidan, they basically say, Al-Ain here means the potential that jealousy can harm somebody else. Al-Ainu haqq, it is true. The one who has Ain can harm you. So beware of Al-Ain, because the jealous guy in his rage does what nobody else does. So he doesn't reject the hadith. He simply has a different interpretation of it, right? So as long as people affirm the Qur'an and the Sunnah, and they have different interpretations, even if we disagree, we should be mature enough to allow for disagreement. Again, we have to move forward from the petty narrow-mindedness that you must agree with every analysis that I have. We have to differentiate between what is called the usul of the deen, the foundations of the deen, in which no two opinions are allowed, and between the furu' or the subsidiary matters. The usul of the deen, Allah is one, the Prophet is the Rasul, He is Khatamul Anbiya, the Qur'an is Wahi. Anybody disagrees about the usul, that is no toleration. We will strongly disagree and we will pronounce verdicts immediately. And then you have the secondary issues. And these secondary issues, how do you understand the sifat of Allah? Does it mean this? Does it mean that? These are issues you find spectrum. We must learn to tolerate without animosity, without hatred. These are people, their lives, their track records are defending Islam. I'm sorry to be blunt here. Look at what Tariq Suwaidan has done for the ummah in terms of da'wah and whatnot. If you find an opinion you don't agree with, okay, Jazakallah khair, and move on. And same with Shaykh Akram Nadawi, same with others of these nature. We have to learn to look at the broader picture rather than become petty. So, and I say this publicly and maybe one day it'll reach them as well. I love them immensely and I politely and respectfully disagree. That's what I want us to do as well. I believe Al-Ain is true. Because the interpretation they're doing, I don't find it to be convincing. When the Prophet sees a child and he says, read Ruqya, this is Al-Ain. You clearly then are seeing that Al-Ain has an impact. It's not just hasad, right? It's an impact that you see in the reality. So, Allahu Alam, I respect their opinions, but I politely disagree. And I think that we should stick with the majority opinion because the reason why is very simple. The sheer quantity of a hadith is too much. We have explicit, authentic hadith in Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Ibn Nisa'i, in Muslim, Imam Ahmad. And then we also have the lived reality that Al-Ain has been diagnosed by many people who are doing ruqya. Many people who do ruqya, they see this reality with their eyes. And they can sense it, and they can treat it, and they can cure it. So, I do believe in the reality of Al-Ain, but I also fully agree with Shaykh Tariq Suwaidan and Shaykh Akram and all of these great giants when they say that unfortunately too many people blame their own shortcomings on an imaginary Al-Ain that doesn't exist in their lives. This, I will tell you, every Raqi will agree with me here. Every true Raqi will agree with what I'm saying. That one of the reasons why, in my opinion, some of our great ulama in our times have rejected Al-Ain is because so many of our own ummah is self-declaring themselves as failures. I can't succeed in my exam because Al-Ain. I'm not getting a job because Al-Ain. I'm not getting married because Al-Ain. And the reason they're not getting a job is they're not trying hard enough. The reason they're not passing the exam is because they're not studying hard enough, etc., etc. So when these great ulama have seen every second family blames Ain for their problems, then the natural reaction has been, you know what, we need to teach these people Al-Ain is not what they think it is. And I understand that sentiment. But there is a middle path. And that middle path is to literally do what I'm doing right now, which is to say they are correct in claiming we have a endemic problem of blaming everything on Al-Ain. Especially with utmost love and respect, our sisters. May Allah protect them and bless them and reward them. Our sisters, every second thing, nazal lag gaye. Nazal lag gaye. This is Al-Ain. And we have to explain to them, no, 99% of the time has nothing to do with anything supernatural. You know, the food came out bad because you didn't cook it properly. You know, going nazar nahi lage, nothing happened there. You know what I'm saying? You didn't add enough salt or whatever. It is what it is. You just blame everything on Al-Ain. Understandably, it will generate a reaction from the clergy class. For some of them, like, guys, stop this. It's foolish. So we have to then be very careful in this regard that we don't read in too much in this reality. Now, there's one other question before we move on. And inshallah we will have a part 3. This is a very deep topic, so we're not going to finish today. It's a lot of topics today. And that is, one of these thinkers said something that I'm going to ask you. One of these thinkers who wants to diminish Al-Ain, and again I respect them immensely, I respect them. One of them said, one of the proofs that there's no such thing as Al-Ain is the fact that rich and powerful people, if Al-Ain were true, all you needed to do, if a politician is elected and the other party doesn't want him to be elected, all they need to do is to get all of the people together and stare at that politician with Al-Ain. Or the cricket team, let's just say, okay? the basketball team, the football team. You don't want the other team to win? Khalas, hire some evil people and say, khalas, give them baddu nazar, give them al-ain. And that doesn't happen. It does not happen in the real world. Politicians are elected even though people hate them, right? Things happen, cricket matches, whatever happen. It's tangibly, observably, demonstrably shown that al-ain is not as, pernicious, as everywhere as people want to make it out to be. And so they say this shows it doesn't exist. And the response, so then the question they say is, clearly when this doesn't happen, this is a negation of the existence of al-ain. What would you say to this? How would you reply to them? Go ahead, Talha, bismillah. How would you reply? Okay, so one interpretation Ustad gives here is that this comes from ajab, which is astonishment. And astonishment typically is not going to be found in somebody that is wanting to dispel a politician or get rid of a politician. So like in Yusuf alayhi salam's case, the astonishment would come when he's going to Egypt in a different land and not when he's in his own land here. This is one interpretation, but it doesn't explain the hasad though. How about the other issue of hasad? Because what if you say, how about the hasad, getting the politician out of hasad? So hasad is the grudge of you not having what the person has. This is a key point here. And generally speaking, listen to me carefully, we do not have hasad for people that are not directly related to us. We might want what they want in a generic way, but we don't have overpowering hasad for them. That's very difficult to have. Let me give you a simple example. What's the billionaire, what's his name? Bill Gates, whatever, okay? Yani, all of us would love to have Bill Gates' money. But frankly, none of us here has hasad for Bill Gates. Our hearts are not burning with jealousy. We're going to sleep. Wow, why is he getting that? No, it doesn't work that way. Because hasad typically only comes, and it is so strange, but it only comes against people that you are very closely associated with. And sadly, wallahi, it's so sad. The hasad is for something utterly trivial, not Bill Gates' wealth. No, cut off 10 zeros, and if your cousin gets a fraction more than you, hasad will come there. Your brother, your uncle gets a little bit, that's where hasad will come. Right? SubhanAllah, this is how shaitan works here. So I don't agree with this hypothetical scenario, that how come ayn doesn't happen for a president, for a basketball team. It doesn't work that way. You don't have ayn for people that you're not interacting with. Ayn is coming from, we're going to come to this point here, ayn is coming from primarily hasad and secondarily from ujub, or from astonishment, ta'ajjub, you're astonished at that. Primarily it is coming from hasad. And hasad, what is hasad? It is an overpowering envy. It is an envy that overtakes the heart. It is an envy that you're going to sleep at night and you are burning inside. How come, she is so beautiful? How come he is so wealthy? By the way, in women, hasad is primarily for beauty or healthy marriages, and in men, primarily hasad is for fame and wealth. Okay? Understand, Allah created us differently. In women, hasad is primarily directed to two things: good marriage and beauty. And in men, primarily hasad is directed towards two things: wealth and fame. Okay? And this is why the people who do ruqya will tell you, and even sihr, and we're going to come to this next week. I'm tantalizing you. Next week we'll discuss the difference between ruqya and between ayn and sihr. This is not this week. Most of sihr and most of ayn, it comes in these four scenarios that I just mentioned: beauty, good marriage, wealth, and fame. Most of it, because this is where it is coming from. That how come he has a good car? How come he has a good house? Or how come, she has the successful this and that? That hasad will lead to al-ayn. So I don't agree with this hypothetical situation at all. Jayyid. Next point, our final point today. Let's do the Q&A to the end. Our final point for today, and then we'll continue next week. This is a very, very difficult question, guys. I have thought about this question literally for more than a decade. I don't have a solid answer, I'm telling you from now. I have asked more than 6 or 7 specialists, And each one of them gives me a slightly different answer. So the question is as follows. Listen to this. This is research I'm doing, and if you have quotations from scholars or if you have an answer, teach it to me, and I will happily mention it next week and ascribe it to you. The question is as follows. So if al-ayn is true, which we believe, how does al-ayn go from one body to another? Like, what is the mechanism of transferring al-ayn? How does it go? Because there must be a tangible power. There must be something that takes from one person to another and causes a problem in the other person. In my research, I found two opinions on this, and I don't have a conclusive answer which one is valid. Wallahu alam.
If you're enjoying our content and want to see more, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like this video. Your support helps us grow and reach more people. Also, if you'd like to help us produce even more frequent and high-quality content, consider contributing to us on Patreon. Every little bit helps, and it means the world to us. So, share with your friends, and let's keep this journey going together. Thanks for all your support.